We are back for another Mock Draft Monday. Today, we're going to be breaking down ESPN's Matt Miller. He dropped a 2-round mock draft for the NFL today, and you guys know what we do around here. We're going to take Matt Miller's mock draft and pretend it's the real NFL draft and do a 2-round rookie mock based on all the draft capital, the landing spots of this one. And this one is fun, let me tell you. This is the one that a fantasy player could have drawn up. This would be great news for all of us that have 2024 first-round picks. So I'm excited to get into this. Of course, if you want to check out the full mock draft, that'll be linked down below in the description. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Danny, how you doing?
Doing well. And yeah, before you guys go in the comments and talk about how this is hyper unrealistic, like we're not going to get the absolute nuts in the NFL draft. Well, I mean, we saw it last year, 3 quarterbacks going in the top 4, Jahmyr Gibbs going in the first round, Bijan going in the first round. Like, shit happens, man. And we as Dynasty fantasy football players have to prepare for these types of scenarios. And not to mention, it's just damn fun talking about great players and great landing spots.
Yeah, exactly. Preparation and fun. That's the 2 reasons we do these videos. So again, Superflex, PPR, half tight end premium will be the format. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. All right, so we are now into the draft. Again, if you skipped ahead, we're doing a 2-round rookie mock draft from a Superflex, PPR, half tight end premium standpoint based on ESPN's Matt Miller's 2-round NFL mock draft. The landing spots, the draft capital will be on the right side of the screen. You guys should be able to see everything there. Full link to the mock draft in case you're curious about the defensive prospects and all that stuff will be linked down below. So, Danny, I'm going to let you kick things off with the first pick in this draft. Of course, got a lot to choose from, a lot of talent, a lot of draft capital, a lot of quarterbacks as well to go from. So I'm assuming you're going to go with the regular standard chalk answer for 101, but talk about the pick.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the standard answer here, 24th overall, has got to be Keon. No, I'm joking. The answer here is Caleb Williams, 101 here, 2 to the Chicago Bears. I think it's very close between him and I'm assuming a guy that's going to go in the top 3, whether me or you take him after this. But regardless, he is still my quarterback 1. He lands in a landing spot with the Chicago Bears, an upstart offense, obviously with DJ Moore on the outside. And Caleb Williams, if people are worried about how he translates to the pros, don't be. I honestly think his median range of outcomes is a Kyler Murray, and that might actually be like the 40th percentile outcome because he's bigger than Kyler, he's more accurate than Kyler, and I do still think that projecting forward, as long as he can just learn how to play in structure at times and not have to play just hero ball, which I do think will be the case at the pros. Schematically, USC was completely out-muscled. Talent-wise, they were out-muscled. Caleb had to play a lot of hero ball. People are using that as a big negative on his profile. Watching the film of him, it honestly just felt like he had to make those types of plays, knowing that the USC defense wasn't getting stops, knowing that his receiver core after losing Jordan Addison was not the same, and knowing that Cliff Kingsbury was still running the show offensively with Lincoln Riley. So, honestly, I have no real concerns about Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be mighty fine with the Chicago Bears. I really do think this could be a potential sneaky playoff team going into next year. And I just think the Caleb Williams, DJ Moore pairing off the bat could be one of the better quarterback wide receiver duos in the league.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment to think about what it would have been like to have Caleb Williams operating LSU's offense with those weapons and Drake May operating Oregon's or Washington's offense with those weapons. Because, obviously those other quarterbacks had better talent around them and better defenses and things like that. But Caleb Williams and Drake May, at least in our opinion, and before the season especially, are the more talented quarterbacks. So it's hard separating the quarterback from his situation sometimes. But yes, don't disagree. Caleb Williams goes 101 to the Chicago Bears, goes 101 in this draft as well. There's some rumors that, the Commanders might be after him. And, of course, Cliff Kingsbury now with Washington, who coached Caleb Williams in this aforementioned 2023 season where his whole offense was out-muscled. But I'm going to roll at 102. Definitely a debate to be made here between the other quarterback, other top quarterback, Drake May goes 102 to the Washington Commanders. Marvin Harrison Jr. also goes 104 to the Arizona Cardinals. I am going to roll with Marvin here. Again, this would probably be team dependent if you guys actually had a roster that you were working with. But Marvin Harrison at 104 to the Cardinals. I mean, we just talked about Kyler Murray. He needs himself a number 1 receiver. Marvin Harrison basically came out of the womb a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. So Marvin Harrison, he does everything well. He's 6'3", 6'4", 210 pounds. He runs routes like his father, who is obviously not that size profile. He's an elite athlete. If anybody's thinking, oh, well, how fast is he? Is he a low-end speed guy? He hit 22 miles per hour this past year in college football. So he's big, he's fast, He's physical. He can run routes. This is Julio Jones. This is Larry Fitzgerald. This
AJ
is
Green.
AJ Green. Like,
Yeah.
this is one of those prospects that comes around once in a generation. I've given 3 generational prospect grades since I've been scouting: Bijan Robinson, Trevor Lawrence, and now Marvin Harrison. This is a dude that is an absolute superstar, and I'm happy to take him here at 102.
100%. It's kind of at this point with Marvin Harrison Jr. and typically having this type of range of outcomes on a prospect profile would kind of get you laughed at. But with Marvin Harrison Jr., if he doesn't end up as an all-pro wide receiver, if he doesn't end up as at least a fringe, if not a surefire Hall of Fame type of wide receiver, it's a disappointment given the prospect profile we're looking at. Height, weight, speed, route running, high pointing the football. I mean, you know how many times in the Michigan game alone, watching the #1 team who just won the national championship after a 15-0 year, playing against a potential top 5 pick with Will Johnson on the other side in the 2025 draft, that Marvin Harrison Jr. was coming off with ridiculous catch after ridiculous catch. He was the reason why Ohio State was in that game for the most part, to be honest. Kyle McCord was spraying it everywhere. Marvin Harrison Jr. was the saving grace of that offense, and that was a constant throughout the year. We noticed multiple times watching the Marvin Harrison film that if Kyle McCord was CJ Stroud, or CJ Stroud maybe stayed an extra year, Marvin Harrison could have probably had 1,900 yards in this collegiate season. He's really that good, and I do think that an AJ Green level comparison is where I landed. If you want to even get higher and say he's Larry Fitzgerald with more athleticism, I also don't think that's a hot take either.
Yeah, and I mean, you think 2 years ago, too, the previous national championship, Georgia Bulldogs, they might win that game if Harrison's not out in the first half. Ohio State had a chance right until the end to win that game, and if they could have a competent kicker, they probably would have won that game. So yeah, Harrison against the last 2 national champions basically just took them to the woodshed and took them out to lunch. So yeah, he's that good of a prospect. No arguments there. What are you doing here at 103? Again, a lot to choose from. We got Jaden Daniels going to the Patriots. We got Drake May to the Commanders. We have Malik Neighbors in a great landing spot to the Chargers. Like, lot to choose from here.
Lot to choose from, and yet such a simple, easy answer for me. Drake May goes 102, Washington Commanders. Like I've said multiple times on the channel over the past 5 months, it kind of feels like, I genuinely think Drake May and Caleb Williams is like a 1A, 1B situation. I mentioned Caleb Williams is my one earlier, ends up going 101 in this mock. I don't think Drake May is that far from him. And obviously landing with Washington. Yet to see how I feel about that head coach offensive coordinator duo with Dan Quinn getting hired, with Cliff Kingsbury getting brought in. But at the same time, you still got Terry McLaurin. You still got Curtis Samuel. You still got Jahan Dotson. You have a very good weapons group to come in. And it would be very fitting that Drake May just replaces the guy at Washington that he replaced at UNC and Sam Howell.
Yeah, I worry a little bit that Drake May is not the greatest under pressure, and getting him hit a lot early on in his career would be kind of detrimental to his outlook in the future. And the Commanders, I would say, of the top teams that are in need of quarterbacks, definitely not in a position in terms of their offensive line to develop a guy. But like you said, the weapons are good. They can invest in the offensive line in free agency. They can invest in later rounds of the draft. They can make trades. There's other avenues other than your first round pick to address your football team. So yeah, Drake May 103 to the Commanders there at 102 in the actual NFL draft, to me makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm very excited about that landing spot for him. Even though, you know, Cliff Kingsbury's not Ben Johnson like we thought initially, I still really do like that landing spot. And for me at 104 here, I think the consensus will be, either 103 or 104 will be Jaden Daniels, because he can run. He's an athletic quarterback. He's going to hold a lot of value. Dog, I got the absolute nuts landing spot for Malik Neighbors, so I can't do it. I mean, I would take Malik Neighbors over Jaden Daniels in most situations, but given that Jaden Daniels went to the Patriots, a bad landing spot, and Malik Neighbors went to the Chargers, a good landing spot, I'm even more confident making this move. This might be a hot take, but I won't step on your toes too much because you're probably going to take Jaden Daniels next. I don't think the Patriots should draft a quarterback this year. Their offense, their roster is far too far away from developing a young quarterback. And I think they would end up regretting that. If I were them, I would shop their pick, trade down, pick up more draft capital, and build their offensive line, build their weapons group, and then maybe aim for a quarterback in a future year and maybe see what you have in, a free agent acquisition, take a day 3 prospect, a swing on that or something like that. But with Malik Neighbors, man, you get an explosive Brandon Ayuk, Stephon Diggs, DJ Moore, whoever you want to compare him to, and you drop him in an offense with Justin Herbert with no long-term outlook for Keenan Allen, who's an older receiver, Mike Williams, who's coming off an ACL tear, Quentin Johnston, maybe he develops, maybe he doesn't, but probably not a sure thing, to say the least at this point right now. Malik Neighbors, if Marvin Harrison's 1A, just like Caleb and Drake, he's 1B. He's an absolute stud prospect. Very strong season this year. In fact, he was robbed of the Biletnikoff Award. I think he was better this year than Marvin was, but of course, Marvin is, a stud in terms of an NFL prospect. So I love both of these guys, and Neighbors to the Chargers, an absolute dream fit.
Yeah, I mean, any other year, it feels like Malik Neighbors would have been the wide receiver 1 in the last few. Like, he's really that talented of a player. Ended up grading as a top 10 talent for me. Explosive out of the wazoo. Very, very good route runner for what he brings to the table. 3-level threat. Obviously, we're going to talk about his teammate in a second here, but I really do think that watching that LSU offense, the wide receivers did a lot of heavy lifting in that offense, and I really do think Malik Neighbors is the perfect fit, landing with Justin Herbert, landing with Jim Harbaugh in that Chargers offense. It's going to be really fun. Obviously, Keenan Allen, aging player, Mike Williams coming off the ACL, Quentin Johnson not really looking like he's worked out so far. We do have an alpha level projection for Malik Neighbors going forward. Really like that pick, but like you said, you're between two names. I will take the other here. It is a super flex mock draft. Got to go with the positional value of the quarterback position with Jaden Daniels. And you mentioned with the Patriots, should they take a quarterback at 3? Should they not? It really depends on their evaluation of Jaden Daniels. We're a little bit lower in terms of what we saw in the film. Again, we both believe that the wide receivers there in LSU really did a lot of heavy lifting, like I said, in this offense. But regardless, he goes top 5. He lands on the New England Patriots. And it's kind of funny because if you were to pick a quarterback prospect that would fit the Patriots the most, it would be Jaden Daniels, because if you're talking about Caleb, if you're talking about Drake, if you're talking about even Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, you want a team that has pass catchers around them, that has, a seasoned offensive line. They're more of, these pocket passing progression type of quarterbacks. With Jaden Daniels, it's like he's the one quarterback that kind of overcome the Patriot situation because of what he does with his legs, how mobile he is. He's not the guy that's going to sit in the pocket and get through his reads and hit you with timing and with progressions. He's going to make plays out of structure. He's going to use that mobility. He's going to create 40, 50, 60-yard rushes. And for a team like New England where the pass catchers aren't great, I really do think this is a good fit for Jaden Daniels in terms of the relative quarterbacks that could have went at this spot.
Yeah, the reason I'm scared is, and again, this is a red flag on Jaden Daniels' profile to begin with, is he's a developmental quarterback, and that's crazy to say about a guy that started 5 years
100%.
in college. I worry that he would get his confidence shattered pretty quickly in this situation, and I would probably let one of my league mates draft Jaden Daniels. And again, if I was a New England Patriots, I would trade down. If Jaden Daniels is sitting there on the board, I'm calling Atlanta, I'm calling Vegas, I'm calling Denver, and seeing how many picks I can get in the future, because you're not a quarterback away from making this team a Super Bowl contender. You are a number 1 wide receiver, franchise left tackle, number 1 edge rusher, number 1 deep. Like, you need so much on this roster. It's not just a quarterback is going to fix everything. So for me, that's what I would do if I was New England. I would not take a quarterback this year unless Caleb or Drake was on the board for me.
Well, I mean, adding to that too, like we mentioned, if you're higher on Jaden Daniels and you think he could be a franchise quarterback, obviously you're going to take him because the quarterback value will trump all. But I really do think, and you agree with this, that there's a big divide here between what Caleb and Drake represent versus what Jaden represents. So, in our opinion, taking him over Marvin Harrison Jr., a surefire potential future Hall of Fame wide receiver, would be a little bit of malpractice here. Again, if you're higher on Jaden Daniels, go for it. But if you're not higher, if you view him maybe as a mid-first type of quarterback, late-first type of quarterback, you should be taking the top 5 overall talent at wide receiver. So you're back on the clock here. Mentioned again, Superflex have to go with the quarterback value. I think that's a pretty standard top 5. The 6 and 7, I think, can go either way. I want to see what direction you go at 6.
Yeah, so right now, and I think because of the draft capital that we got for Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, because it's a super flex draft, you could even make the argument that they would belong as high as this pick, because Bo Nix goes to the Broncos at 12th overall. JJ McCarthy goes to the Raiders at 13th overall. I'm going to stick to talent evaluation wise, who I value pretty highly here. Brock Bowers versus Rome Odunze would be the decision point. Brock Bowers, of course, going 14th to the Saints. Not the greatest landing spot in the world, but they do have targets available outside of Chris Olave.
Leggett added too.
And then, yeah, exactly. And then Rome Odunze going 6th overall to the Giants. I am going to go with Rome Odunze here. I believe he is, you get the top 10 draft capital. Again, barren wide receiver core. Nobody really to speak of there in New York outside of a bunch of slot guys. And, Darren Waller's kind of at the end of his career or whatever. I guess you're rolling with Daniel Jones in this situation. He's going to be your quarterback, at least for the immediate short-term future. But again, we're not drafting wide receivers typically based on landing spots. And honestly, this is not a terrible one. Like, I know it seems bad because it's like, oh, you don't have, in Malik Neighbors' case, Justin Herbert throwing you the ball. But at the same time, nobody else really there is able to command targets. And if Rome Odunze commands 130, 140, 150 targets his rookie season, then all of a sudden this receiving core looks a lot better. You knock everybody down a peg. Wandale becomes a number 2, so on and so forth. You got a field stretcher. You got, a tight end that can contribute. And Odunze is the alpha there. And that's what they've been desperately needing in New York, really since Odell Beckham Jr. left. They haven't really had it. They tried to get it with Kenny Golladay. Obviously, he got the bag and, took off to, Cabo or whatever he's done the rest of his career. Like, Odunze is the alpha that you've needed since Beckham has been gone.
Yeah, I mean, he represents something in that receiving core that they don't have. Obviously, they got that stretch vertical tight end with a guy like Darren Waller. You have a lot of gadget speed guys on this team. Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, Wandale Robinson, all kind of, tertiary options in the passing game. You need that big physical X wide receiver 1 in this offense. And I really do think Rome Odunze could be that for you. Like a Michael Pittman plus. I think Michael Pittman, in terms of his route running ability, in terms of his intelligence, in terms of being able to win at the catch point, represent Pittman. But I also think he's a better athlete than what Michael Pittman wants. Hence, Michael Pittman going at the top of the 2nd round, Rome Odunze going at the 6th overall pick in this mock. I really like Rome Odunze. So before, the Odunze family comes at us in the comments saying how he's the wide receiver 3 off the board, I like Rome Odunze.
Yeah, we love Odunze. Honestly, it's just it's tough when you have Harrison and Neighbors, because Neighbors, Odunze would have been last year's wide receiver 1 by a wide margin, probably too. So he's definitely a great prospect. What are you rolling with here at 107?
Yeah, so you mentioned you were considering this guy, and I know for a fact that you got turned off by the landing spot, not just because of the fact that it's the New Orleans Saints, but also because the target distribution here is going to be weird with Olave, with Leggett, Derek Carr trying to feed them the ball. But regardless, I'm trusting my evaluation. I think Brock Bowers is the most talented player. Brock Bowers is just a freak of nature. I really do think this is a George Kittle clone in college football. Has that Georgia culture, will give you 3 downs. I mean, really, when you're talking about Brock Bowers, you're looking at his prospect profile. There's no real blemish in it aside from he's not like Kyle Pitts size. Like, if he was like 6'6", 240, you would be looking at him as literally the perfect prospect. But at 6'3", 240, moves very well for his size. Again, very, very good blocker and can win at all 3 levels of the field, most notably. We saw, for example, that final drive against Auburn. He's making one-handed catches. He's taking, 25 yards after the catch, breaking 4 tackles to ice the game. Like, this is the type of game-changing offensive fulcrum that the Saints can really use. You have Olave as your true separator. We're going to talk about Xavier Leggett in a little bit, I'm sure, as your number 2 wide receiver. I think Brock Bowers may make this the best weapons core in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bold statement for sure. But with Bowers, I think you're just hoping that he can stay on the field in all 3 downs. That's the only concern that you have there, because he's a little undersized. You don't want him getting blown off
blocker,
the ball
though.
in the blocking game. But he is a good blocker, like you said. At Georgia, he was a very good blocker. It's just functional strength-wise. Hopefully, he can hold up to NFL caliber edge rushers, NFL caliber, linebackers or whatever that he's going to have to block. But he's a great athlete. I mean, he was the best tight end in the country on one ankle this year. Still won the Mackey Award, even despite suffering a high ankle sprain. This was the worst season of his career, and he's a junior, and it was still better than 95% of the best seasons of every other tight end's career that goes in the first round.
Well, what's funny about Brock Bowers is I think he posted like an 84 PFF grade this year, junior. And like you said, half the year, like he was battling injury. Like you can even see, especially in the middle portion of the year, played through injury a couple times, similar to Ladd McConkey. These Georgia guys are just built different in terms of pain tolerance. But regardless, 84 PFF grade is still a very, very high mark. In his freshman and sophomore years, that was over 90. So as good as he was this year, he was better when he was an 18, 19, 20-year-old.
Yeah, and like Dalton Kincaid, for example, had like a 90 PFF grade at like 23, and we were all throwing him, flowers and giving him the first-round draft capital. It's like Bowers has done this 3 times pretty much, minus half the season this year when he was banged up. So 108 is for me on the board, and I would say, generally speaking, this is our top 7 tier of rookie players right now. But as we talked about at the beginning of this video, we got a couple gifts here. We got a bunch of great landing spots for a bunch of good prospects at wide receiver. And we got 2 more first-round quarterbacks with Bo Nix and with J.J. McCarthy. I'm a Bo Nix guy. Do I want to pull the trigger here yet? I definitely could. There's one player that I would still rank over Bo Nix, and he is currently my wide receiver 4, and he went to the absolute nuts landing spot, and that's Xavier Worthy going to the Kansas City Chiefs here. He goes off the board at 32nd overall, so I guess Matt Miller thinks that the Chiefs are winning the Super Bowl, but Xavier Worthy, perfect complement to Rashee Rice. He's a short area of the field, intermediate target, work after the catch. Xavier Worthy is the guy that opens up the downfield element of this offense. Xavier Worthy, if you're just thinking, okay, this is just, the next Henry Ruggs, all he does is run fast in a straight line. No, he has horizontal side-to-side change of direction that helps him run routes at a very high level. Daniel Jeremiah comped him to Marquise Brown. My comp for him, I think his upside is that of a Jalen Waddle. Just picture dropping Jalen Waddle in the Chiefs offense, and that's essentially what you're looking at with Xavier Worthy if he hits at the next level. So I think that upside is too tantalizing. As much as I like Bo Nix and as much as I like some of these other guys, I'm rolling with Worthy there at 108.
Yeah, it's funny because I also had a Marquise Brown comp. You're higher on Xavier Worthy than me, but I can't deny first-round draft capital, 32nd overall, going to the Kansas City Chiefs. Absolutely nuts range of outcomes, and I do think he is worthy of that 108. Had to make that pun. But we go on to the 109 now, and you left me in a tough spot here because I was hoping you took one of the quarterbacks so I can just take the other. It's tough because, JJ McCarthy, obviously the young upside there, landing with the Raiders. Bo Nix, more of the plug-and-play guy, landing with Sean Payton, landing in that offense. It really just depends what you're swinging on. If you're a contending team and you want to swing for the upside, I think that's fine. But if you need a quarterback, I think the logical pick has to be Bo Nix at this spot. I feel like he's got a better path to starting right away, landing with Denver, pairing with Sean Payton. These are very similar grades for me when I watch both of these guys. Oddly enough, both being on the opposite spectrum. Bo Nix more so being the solidified type of projection going into the next level. Baker Mayfield type of being that range of outcome. JJ McCarthy being an incomplete profile because we didn't see him throw at that type of volume. So because we saw with Bo Nix, that's the tiebreaker here. Landing with Denver, landing with Sean Payton, both going with the first round. I don't think you can go wrong with either.
Yeah, I'm a lot higher on Bo Nix than I thought I was going to be. I didn't expect to like Bo Nix at all. I saw him at Auburn. He sucked. He was inaccurate. He was, kind of a good athlete, but didn't really know how to play the quarterback position through his 5 years in college. And that's a red flag on his profile. He's going to be 24 on draft night.
For sure.
He has developed into a very accurate passer, the most accurate passer in the history of college football by completion percentage. He set the record this year. And yes, haters will point to the fact that he throws a lot of horizontal routes. They throw a lot of screens. They throw a lot of short stuff, but he was still the most accurate passer in this class, medium, 10 to 19 yards, and the third most accurate passer in this class, deep. So, he can throw it accurately all over the field. Like you said, that Baker Mayfield-esque profile. When Baker was coming out of Oklahoma, that was his calling card. Move outside the pocket, get him on the move. He can work accurately. He's got a good arm. It's a B-plus arm. It's not Drake Mays or Caleb Williams, but it is still pretty solid, and he can kind of do everything well. He's a smart quarterback. He was the best under pressure in the history of PFF college. His 91.2 grade under pressure is better than anybody has ever posted. The best of the top 15 collegiate averages of the Dynasty quarterback ones right now. Joe Burrow posted an 82 grade against pressure in his legendary season at LSU. Bo Nix was 9 points better this year for Oregon.
Yeah, no, a very, very good player. And on top of that, the big difference maker here, the big tiebreaker too, is because I think Bo Nix has a better opportunity to start right away over JJ. I feel like even if you prefer JJ ceiling, you should be able to get JJ plus for Bo if Bo's starting in week 1 and JJ doesn't start until week 10. So that's a decider too. I think both are going to end up being first round picks, and it will be really fun come draft day.
I hope they do. It's a question mark still because, if Will Levis didn't go in the first round, these guys are kind of in that prospect tier of a Will Levis where, we thought they were going to go in that Levis was going in the first round this whole time. And then he slides to like 33 or whatever it was on draft night. So we'll have to see. But again, this is great news for those of us that would have first round picks. Is more first round quarterbacks, whether you like them or not, are going to push guys down the board, and it's going to make your rookie picks more valuable inherently, especially for those quarterback needy teams. So you're on the board here I'm on the board here at the 110. I am not going to take your boy, JJ McCarthy, because I am not a huge fan of JJ McCarthy. I didn't love his film. I didn't think he was the greatest prospect in the world. I see why people are saying he has a lot of upside, but I personally think it's kind of like the Quentin Johnston factor where it's like in a hypothetical theory, he has a lot of upside, but if he was never asked to be the horse for his offense, he's got some inaccuracies that he needs to work on, pressure specifically in decision-making, needs to get better in those areas. So I'm a little bit lower on JJ McCarthy. I view him kind of more as like a Alex Smith type of quarterback prospect who has some upside, but not like a super, super shit ton. So I'm actually going to roll through the rest of the board here. I mean, we got some first round receivers to talk about still, with Brian Thomas going to the Bengals, with Keon Coleman going to the Cowboys at 24th overall. Into the second round, I mean, Ladd McConkey goes to the Panthers at 33 overall. Troy Franklin goes to the Raiders to pair with J.J. McCarthy at 44th overall. I'm not as high on Brian Thomas, but I do love this landing spot. I mean, you give me Brian Thomas going to the Cincinnati Bengals. My assumption here is that T. Higgins has moved on in free agency. Maybe they tag and traded him or something like that. Working opposite Jamar Chase, he gets to be the downfield weapon while Chase kind of reinvents himself more as your do-it-all number one receiver. This is the type of landing spot I can get on board with Brian Thomas, because I view him as Nico Collins, George Pickens, high-end number 2 receiver or 1B receiver who's a great downfield option. But I still view some flaws to his game. I don't think he's a perfect route runner. I don't think he's going to become a true alpha receiver who commands a 30% target share. I think we're probably talking more 20 to 24% in his NFL career. But if you're playing with Joe Burrow on the Cincinnati Bengals, that's enough to make you a good fantasy option.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm obviously a lot higher on Brian Thomas just as the prospect. I think you basically nailed down his projection to a T. Being that high upside number 2 wide receiver on this team, it would be the ideal situation. I really do think having that vertical wide receiver that showed he can score touchdowns this year, 17 touchdowns scored with LSU. And you see it when you watch the film. His ball tracking ability, phenomenal. Being able to high point the football, phenomenal. And he's just a natural athlete at that 6'4" frame. It really is. It's adding T. Higgins to this offense as a prospect if T. Higgins was able to run a low 4.4, pretty much is how I view it.
Yeah, and I'm sure they have connections at that school. I mean, they've taken their number 1 receiver and their quarterback from LSU, so I'm sure they know some people on the staff there as well to get some recommendations on Brian Thomas. So you're on the board here with the 111. We'll try and speed this up a little bit. We don't want to go too long. What do you're going with JJ here?
Yeah, and you mentioned you're a little bit lower on his ceiling. I really like his ceiling. I think he's got a very good arm. I think he's very mobile. And I saw multiple times at Michigan. You mentioned handling pressure. When he's in the pocket handling pressure, he doesn't handle that well. When he's able to escape the pocket, get on the move, I've seen multiple times throughout his collegiate career him being able to make the plays down the field. Now, obviously, like you kind of mentioned, it is a bigger projection than a Bo Nix. Bo Nix, you kind of know what you're getting, which is why I went with him at that 9 spot. With J.J. McCarthy, it's really kind of like that mystery box at this point because, like you said, he was never asked to be the commanding factor of the offense. With that offensive line, with that running game, with Jim Harbaugh's mentality, with Sharon Moore's mentality, he wasn't the type of guy that was going to go out there and throw the ball 40, 45 times in a singular game. But when you did see 3rd and 7 situation, Michigan needs a play, JJ being able to roll out to his right, find Roman Wilson on a crosser. I saw that multiple times. Colston Loveland working down the seam multiple times. I'm really a big fan of what JJ McCarthy can be. I feel like the difference, like you said, we agree that he's incomplete at this point. I just view his ceiling being a little bit higher than what you projected to be. You mentioned Alex Smith. I think he's got a better arm and is much more mobile than when Alex Smith represented.
Yeah, no, that makes some sense. And I mean, part of the comparison that I've actually seen for JJ McCarthy that I think makes a lot of sense is he's kind of a game manager plus. On those 3rd and 7s, when he has to make a play, he can make a play. And who do we know right now that is currently going to be playing in the Super Bowl that is a game manager plus? Brock Purdy, right? Like, you can be great in a good situation with that kind of profile. I don't think he has a superstar ceiling. I do think he will need a good situation around him. Hypothetically, if the Raiders keep Devontae Adams and they have Jacoby Myers and, they have Michael Mayer developing and they keep Josh Jacobs, then this is a pretty good situation for him.
Yeah, the way it's funny you mentioned that. So Brock Purdy, I view with like a Jared Goff level arm, where it's like a B+, A- type of area. I think it's a stronger arm than Brock Purdy, but like you said, the same type of things. Obviously, Brock Purdy as a decision maker at this point, much more advanced than what JJ McCarthy is, which is why he's playing on Sunday. But I really do think that JJ McCarthy, if he can land in a Kyle Shanahan scheme, if he can land with Minnesota, one of these spots, obviously lands with the Raiders here, not the most ideal landing spot, but regardless, I do trust JJ to reach that potential long term, even if it's not in year 1.
Yeah, for sure. So that makes some sense to me. I am going to roll with 2 options here. You got Keon Coleman who goes to the Cowboys. I mean, that's a great landing spot. He's got targets available there outside of CeeDee Lamb. They don't really have a whole lot going on long term. I am going to go, we talked about this when we talked about like reviewing the rookie class and like, what's just like a great fit? What's just a glove-like fit? And that is Ladd McConkey going to Carolina Panthers.
I knew you were going to do it.
Panthers have, let's look at their offense this year. They had Adam Thielen, who's like 35 years old. He was completely washed, but he was still productive. Then you had Jonathan Mingo, who's really raw, doesn't really know how to play wide receiver at this point, and you had DJ Chark, who's just a field stretcher. They needed a guy that can move the chains consistently. They needed a guy who was going to play the Adam Thielen role only to actually do something after the catch with it and consistently command targets and don't break down as the season went along like Adam Thielen did. And Ladd McConkey is an excellent route runner, one of the best in this class. He has one of the best set of hands in this class. He is unbelievable at timing routes, which is exactly what Bryce Young needs and what Dave Canales' offense thrives on as well. So get him out on the move, get Bryce Young comfortable, and get him a short target that he can get the ball to when he's pressured. So Ladd McConkey, love that fit. I think he is absolutely going to go this high, especially once he runs, probably in the 4.3s at the NFL Combine. So I love that fit. I absolutely love McConkey of the Panthers.
It's funny because when we recorded, if you guys are on Flock, we recorded our pass catcher 6 to 10, about a month and a half ago. And after that, I watched the Alabama game where Ladd McConkey wasn't fully healthy. And I had said on there that, he didn't really look good in this game. I don't really know how to project this moving forward. End up watching 4 more games. This guy is an absolute wizard. He is my wide receiver 5 in this class. Comp to Doug Baldwin. If you guys remember prime Doug Baldwin catching passes from Russell Wilson, I really do think you're getting a similar player. And it's funny that your comp also is a former Seahawks wide receiver with Golden Tate, getting that Z wide receiver that can play in the slot, route technician, and the really underrated factors. People are going to say, white wide receiver. Obviously, he's going to be a technician, gritty, hard worker, Hunter Renfrow, Julian Edelman type. This cat's got wheels, man. I would be shocked if he didn't run under 4.44, 4.45. I really do think this is a guy that could be pushing the 4.3s in that 40-yard dash. True 3-level threat, the best route runner in this class. Projecting forward, he is going to be that number 1 wide receiver for the Panthers, and he's exactly what Bryce Young needs to be able to develop. So I was really hoping he fell back to me, but I am back on the clock. And you mentioned Keon Coleman to my Dallas Cowboys. Kind of got to go with that spot. You're talking about the upside play at wide receiver. Now, am I the biggest Keon Coleman fan there is? No. He's my wide receiver 10 right now. I'm a little bit lower on him than consensus, but him getting first-round capital, him landing on one of the best offenses in the NFL, pairing with Dak Prescott, I think it could be your long-term Michael Gallup replacement, being that ex-wide receiver, working at the boundary. We've seen multiple times Michael Gallup, when the Cowboys need a big play down the field when he was in his prime, being able to come down with those passes. And now, unfortunately for Michael Gallup, isn't that same caliber player at all at this point in his career. I think Keon Coleman can represent those factors and even give you a little bit more in terms of that frame that he brings to the table compared to Gallup.
Yeah, definitely makes some sense there with Keon Coleman. I'm a little higher on Coleman. I saw a little bit of underrated nuance with his route running, but the problem for Keon Coleman was he was like a 17th percentile separator, right? So he's going to need to learn to run routes at a better level. Hopefully Lamb can help him out with that because he obviously is one of the better route runners in the league. So Coleman, I like the fit. I think he actually would be a good replacement to Gallup. You just hope you're not replacing one guy who can't separate with another guy who can't separate, because that wouldn't be ideal here, which is why, you said like Xavier Worthy would probably be a little bit better of a replacement, because then you get the Cooks replacement rather than the Gallup replacement, which is a little bit more of an important thing to your offense.
Yeah, I've said that in the past. I think Worthy would be the Cooks replacement, and then here getting Coleman would be that Gallup replacement. So really like the fit regardless, even if he's my wide receiver 10. I would be personally wanting this in the second round area, but if they do it here, we have to acknowledge in fantasy that he will be very valuable.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm back on the board here. Got a number of other receivers that I like. I mean, I like Troy Franklin. He goes to the Raiders with your aforementioned JJ McCarthy there. Yep. Adonai Mitchell going to the Titans. Again, I think everybody looks at the Tennessee Titans and thinks it's a disgusting landing spot because of what they used to be, but we don't have Mike Vrabel there anymore. Like, Will Levis is a gunslinger. You got a better landing spot there. I am actually going to take the only running back selected in this entire mock draft here with Jonathan Brooks, going to replace his absolute clone in Aaron Jones there. So it sounds like we've actually heard this, that Aaron Jones is going to be back with Green Bay this year, but that's perfect because Aaron Jones and Jonathan Brooks are one and the same, exactly the same type of player. And Jonathan Brooks coming off a torn ACL anyway. So Aaron Jones, early on in the season, he can carry the load. As the season goes along in his rookie year, I expect Jonathan Brooks to take over that role. And Jonathan Brooks would have been by far the best running back in this class had he not torn his ACL. And I think second round draft capital is still not out of the range of outcomes for him. I think it's probably unlikely given the injury, but it could still definitely happen. So, I mean, Jonathan Brooks going to the Packers with all that young talent on that offense. Jordan Love is a franchise quarterback by the looks of it. Love this landing spot for him.
Yeah, I was really hoping he fell back. I was hoping maybe you took a bite at the wide receiver position. Jonathan Brooks, great fit, landing with the Packers, only day 2 running back that we know of in this mock. Obviously, no third round, so we don't know if like Benson went or these other running backs went in that third round area. But Brooks finding his way in the second round despite tearing his ACL really shows signs to what the NFL would value him as. Basically, him going 58 overall with the torn ACL is the NFL saying he is the best running back in this class. It is not particularly close, because if it was particularly close, we would see a running back go above Jonathan Brooks. But I like that pick a lot. Green Bay Packers, clone of Aaron Jones, the potential future replacement of Aaron Jones. Like that a lot. And you mentioned AD Mitchell in the Tennessee Titans landing spot. That is where I'm going to lean right here, because I really do like this landing spot. We don't know yet whether or not they bring back DeAndre Hopkins, but for the sake of Adonai Mitchell, I hope they do. He can learn from DeAndre Hopkins. He's a raw player. Learning that consistent work ethic that we've seen from DeAndre Hopkins throughout his career would be very good for the development of AD Mitchell. On top of that, getting a gunslinger like Will Levis, getting an offensive system like Brian Callahan will be bringing to the table with Tennessee, operating that Zach Taylor, Cincinnati Bengals influence there. Really excited for the future of AD Mitchell should he land here. And I really do think long-term, he will be that number 1 wide receiver for Will Levis if this was the case.
Yeah, and I mean, some people have comped AD Mitchell to T. Higgins. I mean,
Yes.
Brian Callahan's going to have familiarity with a receiver like that. And if DeAndre Hopkins were to be back, he also like absolute 100th% range of outcomes, 100th percentile would be like a DeAndre Hopkins caliber receiver if AD Mitchell could develop. So I have some concerns with him. Not the best after the catch, not the best in terms of effort on some plays. He also is very inconsistent just in general over the course of his tape, but he does have a high ceiling for sure. I absolutely think has one of the higher ceilings in this class. You just got to get the best out of AD Mitchell, and I think that Brian Callahan could do that. And I mean, back shoulder fades from Will Levis could be all day with AD Mitchell there as the nickname there. So I'm going to roll with at the 2-4. I would have probably gone with Franklin over Mitchell, just given that I think Franklin is a better prospect than Mitchell. I like this fit. I don't exactly know what the situation is here with Devontae Adams. I would assume if you're taking a receiver 44th overall, maybe you trade Devontae Adams to the Jets or something like that, or maybe you release him or whatever the case is. But regardless, I mean, long term, you don't really have a number 1 receiver for this team. You have Michael Mayer at tight end. You have Jacoby Myers on like a 2 or 3 year deal, and Devontae Adams is older. So JJ McCarthy develops. I think this is the type of receiver he could absolutely use. He's got a decent deep ball. He's good timing and rhythm based kind of thrower, and Troy Franklin can win at the line of scrimmage on short routes and that kind of thing. So I actually really like the landing spot here for Troy Franklin. I think the Raiders are an underrated landing spot for a receiver in general, because I think everybody assumes that they have their receivers, but they don't really long term, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. So for our comps for Troy Franklin, for anyone that is curious, I'm trying to find where they're listed.
My comp for him was Jameson Williams runs into Devontae Smith at full speed, because I don't think Devontae Smith was a better prospect than Troy Franklin, but he has like Jameson Williams' body type where he's like bigger and longer and leaner, but he's running routes better than Jameson Williams. So they're kind of like a mix of the two, where you're not getting as refined of a player as Devontae Smith, but Troy Franklin is a lot younger than Devontae Smith was coming out of school, a lot more meat on the bone to coach him up a little bit. So I do really like that prospect fit, but he has the speed like Jameson Williams had.
Yeah, so if you were to scale both those factors back, JMO and Devontae back, it would kind of end up being my guy, because I have Calvin Ridley, 4-4-1 type of player, obviously a refined route runner, can win all 3 levels. We saw prime Calvin Ridley be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. So this is very high praise for Troy Franklin. My wide receiver 7, your wide receiver 5, very high regards for him in this class. So you end up going him there at that pick. Just scanning the board to see who is left. I could go with a guy like Xavier Legette, despite the landing spot there with the Saints. Big fan of Legette's game. You could go with a guy like Jalen Polk, landing with the absolute nuts there in Buffalo. I'm really torn which one I lean. I think I'm going to trust my grading here, and I'm going to go with Xavier Legette. Obviously, not the most ideal landing spot here. He would be much higher if he landed on one of the prime spots, but Xavier Legette lands with the Saints, pairing with Derek Carr, pairing with what they got in the first round there with Brock Bowers and Chris Olave. I think that's going to be your future trio in terms of pass catchers in this offense. Now, do I trust Derek Carr to be able to feed them the football? I do not know. But when I watch Xavier Legette, if you were to take out his analytical profile, this guy would be a legitimate top 4, top 5 overall wide receiver in this class based off the film I watched this year. My comp for him is a guy like DK Metcalf, big physical downfield wide receiver, unstoppable on crossing routes. The only problem I have is, do I really trust the Saints to be able to get the best out of him?
Yeah, I mean, the range of outcomes is very much, if we're talking about an Ole Miss wide receiver, it's either A.J. Brown or Jonathan Mingo. That's the range of outcomes here. So it's a very wide range of outcomes. You could miss big on this one by going with Xavier Legette because the red flags on his profile, he only had 1 year of production as a redshirt senior. That is definitely not ideal. But like you said, that 1 year of production was damn good.
Dominant.
And he hit all those like best season yards per route run, best season PFF receiving grade, all those marks that you want to see when a player just naturally gets better. Sometimes he's getting better. Sometimes he's beating up on poorer competition. But in the SEC, watching him get better as a player was very evident. It wasn't just that he was catching deep balls along the sideline and mossing people. He was winning on routes, and not the greatest Senior Bowl by the sounds of it. So that's not ideal for him. But once he gets to the combine, I'm sure he's going to test out the berserk and run and jump and do everything that he needs to do. So I am glad you went with Legette because I wanted Jalen Polk, who, as we talked about with Fitz, right? We're talking about Fitz. Jalen Polk is so reliable, and the Bills offense needs reliability because Allen's kind of a loose cannon. You know, Stephon Diggs, a bit of a loose cannon.
He's always pouting.
You know, Gabriel Davis is the definition of unreliable. Like, Dalton Kincaid had suspect hands this year. Like, you need a guy that's going to catch the ball every time you throw it to him. And Jalen Polk probably is the best hands in this class.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you guys are curious about the fit here, think like a Tyler Boyd added to this offense. I really do think that's the projection for Jalen Polk. You had his comp to a guy like Rashee Rice as well. That possession wide receiver, he's not going to burn you necessarily, but like you said, reliable hands, good ball tracker down the field, can high point the football to make him a 3-level threat. So if you're worried, oh, is he just going to be a first level type of player? No, because I really do think the hands are special enough and the downfield ability when the ball is in the air is special enough to make up for the athletic shortcomings.
Yeah, and I don't think he's a bad athlete. I think he'll probably run in like the 4.5s or something like that. I just don't think he's going to be like an elite athlete or anything like that. I think the range of outcomes is there for him to become like a Rashee Rice because I do think he is pretty good after the catch as well. So, I mean, we got a couple more players to rattle off here. Do we have enough to fill out the entire second round? I don't know if I think we're going to come up short a little bit.
We should have enough because we still have Penix, we still have Tez Walker, we still have Corley, we still have Wilson, we still have Sanders, and that's it. So that's what, 6 guys I said?
Yeah, I think 5 or 6. We might be one guy short, but anyways, what are you rolling with here at 2.7?
Yeah, so this is where it starts getting a little greasy here. So the Jaguars don't go with a wide receiver in the first round. And I really do like the spot here. I do think they need another reliable playmaker with some speed added. I took my other Michigan boy. May as well go with a second Michigan boy with Roman Wilson. Now, I will be honest, I have not formally graded him yet. However, as a Michigan fan, I've seen basically every single one of this guy's games. He dominated the Senior Bowl. He's going to test out of the wazoo at the Combine. Really a good vertical slot type of wide receiver projection moving forward. It's curious with the fit here because obviously they do have Christian Kirk, and ideally you would want Roman Wilson being the Christian Kirk in this offense. But I do think that pairing with Trevor Lawrence long-term, if they do take him with day 2 draft capital, they have a plan for him, and I want to trust that in the mid-second round. So a little bit of a wonky profile, but I will take him here landing with Trevor Lawrence, who we still believe in.
Yeah, I don't like the fit either. I think Roman Wilson's kind of like a Khalil Shakir, like as like the median projection, and then he can kind of be better than that if he hits his ceiling. But I don't really like the fit because I think Kirk's role is exactly what he would thrive in. But Lawrence could use another guy like Kirk. I mean, we saw what happened when Kirk was off the field. Lawrence looked like a completely different quarterback. So it's possible they want to move away from like the Calvin Ridley archetype of like a separator and just get a bunch of, short, fast slot receivers on the field for him and let him work the field horizontally. Which is weird because Lawrence had, big receivers at Clemson with T. Higgins and Justin Ross. So little strange of a fit there, but I don't mind that one. You went to your favorite college football team. I'm going to go to mine with Ja'Tavion Sanders going to the Cincinnati Bengals. At one point in time, I would have said like Brock Bowers and JT Sanders were a lot closer, but they're pretty far apart in my opinion. I think JT Sanders, the fact that he isn't outperforming Brock Bowers when Brock Bowers playing through a high ankle sprain all year, it's pretty clear indication that JT Sanders has a lot of work to do. He's an exceptional athlete, one of the best in the country for sure at the tight end position. Very good after the catch, very athletic, very strong, very physical. Just some mental lapses. And the thing I worry about with JT Sanders is he OJ Howard or is he David Njoku, right? because OJ Howard had everything possible to become an elite tight end in the NFL. He just couldn't put it together mentally, and then he suffered some injuries and stuff like that. So I'm hoping JT Sanders has what it takes above the shoulders to be able to develop. The nice thing in his favor is that he is just a redshirt sophomore. OJ Howard was a senior coming out of Alabama, and he didn't have it all put together yet. So with JT Sanders, he's an early declare. He's very young. He's like 20 years old still. So he still has a lot of time to put it all together, which makes me think he's more so David Njoku than he is OJ Howard. In this landing spot, I mean, second round draft capital of the Bengals, they've been kind of looking for a tight end for a while, and they haven't really been able to find one. And I think Sanders is at least a great field stretcher for them. And then, I mean, you're stretching the field vertically, grabbing Brian Thomas and JT Sanders to go along with Jamar Chase in this offense. Could be a really fun retool for the Bengals here.
Yeah, no, really like the fit there with JT. I really considered him at my pick as well, but I did end up going with Roman. But I'm back on the clock here. And like you mentioned, we are actually one player short. I did the count. So there's 11 second rounders and 12 first rounders. So if you're watching, just stick with us. Well, we'll do our best here. I think this has to be the spot I go Michael Penix. Not the biggest fan of the prospect, older player, a lot of injury concerns. Really was not a fan of his ball location when watching him this year. Really do think he was a product of those three wide receivers, three NFL caliber wide receivers at Washington. But at this point, he goes 42nd, lands with Kevin O'Connell, lands with that Vikings landing spot that is arguably the best of the entirety of the quarterback needy teams in the NFL landscape. And distributor wide receiver that needs weapons. Well, guess what? You do have weapons there with Jordan Addison, with Justin Jefferson, with TJ Hawkinson on the outside. So I'm assuming in this scenario, maybe they tag Kirk or they sign up for 1 year and then Penix is the eventual replacement, or maybe they just move on from Kirk and Penix is starting year one. But regardless, this is the nuts range of outcomes for Michael Penix. And I know we're going to get people in the comments saying, how does he not go higher? We're just not big fans of the prospect himself.
Yeah, my comp for him is kind of like the caliber of prospect and the strengths that he has is kind of like a Hendon Hooker, Dwayne Haskins. Maybe he becomes Tua Tagovailoa, but with Tua, he was an early declare. He was very, very good early on in his career. He has more arm talent than Penix. He was more accurate than Penix. So I don't like left-handed quarterback. He's Tua Tagovailoa. I don't think that's a good comp for him. I think he's more so in the lines of like a less athletic but more accurate Hendon Hooker, if that makes any sense. So not a huge fan of the prospect profile, but like you said, good landing spot, good weapons around him. I will take the second last player here in this mock between Tez Walker, who went 43rd overall to the Atlanta Falcons. And then we also have Malachi Corley, who went 46th overall to the Colts. I don't like the Colts landing spot because I think Josh Downs is a much better player than Malachi Corley. And you're not going to take Downs out of the slot to put Corley in there. I think Corley's going to end up being a Paris Campbell, who literally went to the Colts also around this pick in the draft. And he's going to be a design touches guy. He's not going to be a wide receiver that runs all the routes. So I'll take the upside that Tez Walker becomes a deep threat for potentially a better quarterback. We didn't get one in this actual mock draft. Maybe they sign a Baker Mayfield. Maybe they trade for Fields or sign Cousins or something like that.
Yeah, no, in Tez Walker, I was not a big fan of. I'm not going to lie. It's funny that the two last receivers on the board. So if you guys are unfamiliar, you guys will be seeing in mid-February, we will be dropping a draft guide where we watch these prospects up. We've so far watched 13 wide receivers, and these guys, so far for me at least, were the 12th and 13 wide receivers I had in my grading. With Tez Walker, for being 23 years old, I was really disappointed with how underdeveloped he was. Can't run routes worth anything. There's really just relying upon his deep ball ability, being able to high point the football, being able to just out athlete people. And I don't necessarily think that going into the NFL at 23 years old, not having a refined game, that he can just simply out athlete people at that level. There's going to be professional players on the same type of diets. We're going to get the best athletes in the world playing in the NFL. I don't necessarily think Tez Walker can win at the rate he was at UNC and at Kent State.
Yeah, I know. If you guys are thinking we always just say, "Oh, the receivers made the quarterback," Drake May made the receiver here.
Yes.
It wasn't the situation we had with Penix here, or with JJ McCarthy, or Jaden Daniels, or what we were talking about there. Like, it was very clear that Drake May threw him open very often.
Yes.
And part of the reason why he was successful at UNC in the 7 or 8 games that he played, when he came off of suspension, is because Drake May is such a good quarterback, and he was desperately searching for a weapon. And I think Tez Walker kind of emerged by default. He didn't really have a great wide receiver. To me, this is, a day 2 wide receiver, third round caliber asset here, top 100 type of pick. But people are hyping this guy up as a potential first rounder, and I think that is absolutely ludicrous. We saw it at the Senior Bowl. He couldn't catch a cold in the game, in the drills. Like, he wasn't separating. Apparently, he's going to run fast in a straight line and jump high, and he's a big dude, but he's not really much else other than that.
Horrible after the catch. Like, I don't even recall off my head watching him make anybody miss for the most part. Like, he was the type of player where big frame, when he caught the ball, he was able to work down the field, but you got nothing after the catch. So with Tez Walker, it's funny because we kind of both have a similar projection for him. You have him projected NFL role as a field stretcher, me vertical number 3 wide receiver, basically the same thing. Alec Pierce versus DJ Chark. Like, that's what you're kind of looking at here. Like, that vertical tertiary, maybe he catches 143-yard pass in a game and catches 2 of 6 targets for 53 yards in a game. Like, that's the type of role I see him playing in the next level. And if people are watching and you're big Tez Walker fans, please leave in the comments what you guys saw in him. And when we rewatch him, maybe we'll see some more. But on first watch, man, the first 3 games that I watched of him, wasn't the biggest fan of Tez Walker. I really do think he's a very limited player for how old he is, 22.9 years old.
And I was excited to watch him too. Like, I saw the stat line against Georgia was very impressive when he was at Kent State in 2021 or in 2022. I was like, holy crap, this guy decimated Georgia. And then you watch both of the plays and their screen passes that he housed for 70 yards. And it's like, okay, well, he just ran faster than everybody. Like, he didn't really do anything on those plays. He just kind of ran fast on a screen pass and he got behind the defense. And like, that's going to happen sometimes, but it probably won't happen much in the NFL. So we're going to go with the last player here. I guess you're going with Corley.
Yeah. I guess I will defend Malachi Corley. So when I watched him, think of like a Randall Cobb type of player. Your comp to him was Laviska Shenault. And really, if people will throw the moniker of he's a gadget player to a lot of players in this class, Malachi Corley is a gadget player. He is not a refined receiver at this point, not a refined route runner, cannot win down the field, iffy hands. But what he does very well is that he is an extremely tough player. And this guy's arguably the best yards after catch receiver in this class outside of maybe Malik Neighbors. That's the type of talent we're dealing with. Big physical wide receiver. I see why people see the veins of a Deebo Samuel comp. The only problem is that Deebo Samuel can actually win as a route runner. Deebo Samuel could actually win high pointing the football down the field. Have not seen evidence of Malachi Corley being able to do that just yet. Hence why I have him more so as a Randall Cobb type of fit than a, Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, physical yak beast, like some of the people that are higher on Corley would compare him to. But I will say, you mentioned you don't like the fit of Indianapolis, and on face value, I do agree. Being with Josh Downs, what exactly is the role of 2 smaller in terms of height wide receivers? But I would also, if he landed here, 46th overall, trust Shane Steichen to be able to get the best out of him. So that's kind of where I'm at with him.
Yeah, Shane Steichen's a good enough coach to be able to do that. That's a good point for sure. Yeah, I think Corley, it's like for every Deebo Samuel, there's 4 or 5 Laviska Shenault, Rondale Moore, David Bell, guys that were force-fed targets in an offense where their quarterback play wasn't good and they just, ran slants and button hooks and screen passes most of the time and get the ball in the hands of your best player. That's basically what Western Kentucky did. Can't fault them for it. They helped them, move the offense, and Corley's obviously very good after the catch, but I'm hesitant to say that he's going to develop into some elite route runner at the next level without a lot of good coaching. And Steichen, good coach, but a little bit skeptical there. So that is the end of the video. Went a little bit longer on this one, but I think it was good conversation. Again, the link for Matt Miller's full mock draft will be down below in the description there. If you're down there and you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. If you guys are new around here, leave any comments down below. If you want access to our draft guide, which will be dropping in about 10 days from now, February 15th, version 1, about 25, 30 prospect write-ups, player cards, comparisons, the games that we watch, strengths, weaknesses, what we would do with them in rookie drafts, all that stuff will be available February 15th on Flock Fantasy exclusively. So if you're on the fence, you don't know, if you should sign up, on Flock Fantasy, you'll get our rankings, Superflex, 1 quarterback, top 250s for startups, rookie rankings, and the draft guide, as well as our draft class databases, our trade calculator, first priority to dynasty decisions, a free Zoom consult if you sign up annually, 6 months for free if you sign up annually, and a 7-day free trial, all with that promo code FSE. That'll be linked down below in the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.